reciting Al-Fatiha. So for those of you who haven't swiped in, so please swipe in now or later. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for coming today. So as we all know, the topic that we'll be discussing on today is about ISIS, acquiring knowledge for a better understanding. So for me, it's not just like an Islamic knowledge that we have to know, it's a world knowledge, it's a general knowledge, because it's happening not around us, Muslims only, but around all people. Let me introduce our speaker today. His name is Muhammad. Ali Ashraf bin Muhammad Al-Zaidin. So obviously he is our MSAB president. He's majoring in EE and now he's a junior. What else? So I guess I'll just pass it to Ali. So welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Again, now I hope you guys don't mind, but this is supposed to be a public presentation, open to everyone here on Vanderbilt. So in case there were any non-Malay, attendees, I have prepared most of the slide I have prepared the entire slide actually in English, and so I will be conducting most of it in English as well. It's a Saturday and it's raining, and you guys came, so thank you for that. Now, it means that most of you are aware that this is a serious issue, and that ISIS has tarnished the name of Islam like no other group before it. Its extremism is so extreme, such that groups like Al-Qaeda and the Jabhat al-Nusra, which is a faction of Al-Qaeda in Syria, have excommunicated ISIS and declared them too extreme for their own purposes. So you know that when the people responsible behind 9/11 declare you too extreme, you know that there's something messed up. Okay? And also, there have been 2 Western journalists that have been executed by this radical group. So the spotlight is, as usual, on Muslims. I myself, over the course of the past few months, have faced numerous questions from Americans about ISIS, about what we think about them, about what Islam says about ISIS. So by the end of the presentation, you all should have enough confidence to answer what is ISIS, where did they come from, and you should be able to say beyond the shadow of a doubt that Islam strongly opposes ISIS and whatever it is they stand for. Now, before I begin this talk, short disclaimer. As Amma mentioned, I am majoring in electrical engineering. I'm not an expert in this topic. Whatever I present to you today is my understanding from roughly 2 to 3 months of reading about ISIS from various sources. I'm not Reza Azlan, I'm not a historian, I'm not a scholar in this topic. I've taken one course from Vanderbilt, the Arab Spring, in fall 2015. It's mildly related to this. But besides that, I I have no qualification in this topic any more than you do. So if I say anything that you know is wrong, if I say anything you know is outdated, please don't hesitate to correct me. Okay. So, let's just begin just a short sort of discussion, if we can make that happen. What you guys already know about ISIS? Anyone? No one? No? You came here because you didn't know anything? Okay. Yes?
Yeah, they came from Iraq.
Came from Iraq. That's true. Anybody else?
It stands for Islamic State of Iraq and Syria.
Yes. Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. It's true. Okay. Anybody? Anything else? Yes? That you'd like to share? That maybe you'd like me to touch on in this presentation? Even though it's not 20 minutes? Okay. Anyways. True. ISIS originated in Iraq. It stands for Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And of course, they've done some pretty bad things. They've killed 2 journalists. They've carried out mass genocide in various towns in Syria and Iraq. But besides that, no one really knows anything about them. So, this whole ISIS thing began due to the conflict in the Middle East. To understand ISIS, we have to understand the region in which they came from. The Middle East has been in conflict ever since the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate. And every single problem that we face in the Middle East can be boiled down to 3 specific agreements. Every single problem we face can be boiled down to those 3 agreements. The first one is the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence. The guy on the right is Sir Henry McMahon. He's the British High Commissioner in Egypt. For Malaya, we had Sir Henry Gurney. This guy is the equivalent person in Egypt. And this guy is Sharif Hussein ibn Ali, the Sharif of Makkah. He's the steward, the governor of Makkah as well. If any of you watch Lord of the Rings, the steward of Gondor, the father of Farmi Border? No? Okay. Anyways, yeah, he's basically just the mayor, per se, of Makkah. Now, the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence is just a series of letters between the two. Sharif Hussein ibn Ali, he wants to become the Khalifa. That time, the Khalifa was from the Ottomans. It was the rulership of the Ottoman Turks. But he didn't like that. He wanted to become the Khalifa. He wanted to rule over Arabia. By Arabia, I don't mean Saudi Arabia. I mean the entire Hijaz Peninsula, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, that whole area. He wants to be the ruler. Now, initially, the British didn't pay any attention to this guy. We don't want to cause any trouble. So they just ignored him. But then World War I happened. And in World War I, British was part of the Allied powers, and the Ottomans were part of the German side. They're on the German side. It's not the Axis. Yeah, Axis was World War II, but they're on the German side. So now the British begins to take interest in Sharif Hussein ibn Ali. They want a way to fight the Ottoman Turks. And what better figure to rally the Arabs against the Ottoman Turks than Sharif Hussein ibn Ali? The Sharif family have been ruling Makkah for over almost 1,000 years. They are direct descendants from the Prophet ﷺ, and they have an extremely high influence over the Arab people. Okay, so the British, Sir Henry McMahon sent a letter to Sharif Hussein ibn Ali, and he promised that if Sharif waged war against the Ottoman Turks, the British would grant Sharif Hussein ibn Ali all the lands of Arabia, and he could establish power over the Ottomans. He could become the Khalifa. Sorry. And from this, the entire Lawrence of Arabia story started. Sir Henry McMahon appointed a man named T.E. Lawrence to help rally the Arabs, to help Sharif Hussein ibn Ali rally the Arabs against the Ottoman Turks. And T.E. Lawrence is actually a very, very close family friend of Sharif Hussein Mahdi. They were on a first name basis. They were that close. Now, the second agreement that is the cause of every single conflict we face in the Middle East is the Sykes-Picot Agreement. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was an agreement between the French, the Russian, and the English. And this was after the McMahon-Hussein correspondence. So this was after the British promised Sharif Hussein Arabia. Now, basically what it was is, should we win World War I, how should we divide up the lands among ourselves? Okay? So the British wanted the red area, the French wanted the blue, and the Russians wanted the green. Now bear in mind, this was after they have already promised Sharif Hussein all of Arabia. So after that, they backstabbed him, they double-crossed him, they went behind him and they said, no, actually, we're going to split it up like this, you don't get anything. But Sharif Hussein didn't know that. The Sykes-Picot Agreement was a top-secret agreement. Nobody knew about it for years. Only after the Tsars of Russia were toppled, you know, before World War I, Russia was ruled by the Tsars, a dynasty. They were toppled. The new government wanted to expose their corruption. They found the Sykes-Picot Agreement, made it public. And the British, you know, they worked their way around it. They say, oh, don't worry, you Arabs. We'll deal with it when the time comes. You guys are still getting your land. Don't worry. This is just something we're saying to the French to keep them happy. And the Arabs believed that all the way until the end. And the Sykes-Picot Agreement, as you can see, it overlays the modern borders, the borders of the modern Middle East. So it crosses tribal allegiances, it breaks any sort of ethnic boundaries that have been established over thousands and thousands of years, and instead just places arbitrary lines in the desert. Now, I have a short video just to convey to you the absurdity of this agreement and just how wrong it is. Because Sykes and Picot, Sykes was an Englishman, Picot was a Frenchman. They both had never been to the Middle East. They don't know anything about the Middle East. They just came down, sat at a table and said, you know what, I want this part and that part looks good to me. And then they signed the page, they delivered it to their governments, and it was agreed upon. So I have a video just to illustrate to you guys just how absurd this is, basically. It's from Comedy Central, so just, yeah.
Maybe it's time we just went back to where a lot of these problems started. The original sin. With a British man 100 years ago drawing a map of a place he'd never been to, filled with people he'd never met, forming new countries with no attention paid to ethnic or religious tensions. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Sir Archibald Mapsalot III.
To be here, John. Now, what's all the bother about here?
It's actually about the Middle East, Archibald.
Oh, ghastly place, never been there, don't want to. Now, India, there is a land worth subjugating, I'll tell you.
No, I understand.
I will tell you.
And Archibald, it's just, you know, the borders that you drew back after World War I, well, they've proven to be a little unstable and somewhat controversial.
Really? Not the problem. We'll just draw them again.
Right, well, yep. That's the problem. You're a little cavalier about that.
Righty-ho, well, this time I'll take great care. Quick scribble on the old globe. I guarantee you, before you know it, Bob's your uncle, it's gin o'clock. Let's take a look. Yeah, I see your problem right here. The lines are too squiggly.
Right.
John. As my father once told me, when borders get squiggly, people get squiggly. What you want is a nice straight line, John. A nice straight line, straight as you can, like that. Lovely. Lovely.
Yeah, that's what you've done there, actually, though, is you've taken some land from Turkey, and then now you've got a Kurdish population there in a disputed zone.
A what? In a who? Living in a where, John? This is imperialism! Listen, boy, first rule is don't overthink it. Second rule, don't think at all. Check your brain at the door with your brolly. The Turks will learn to live with it, John, and if they don't, who really cares? See how easy this is? Biff boff, pish posh, take out the squiggles, put in the straights, lovely. There you go, there you go. And we're done. I'm parched, time for naughty sherry, because if I know Arabs, John, and believe me, I do not, they like nothing more than alcohol after a good Western intervention.
Right,
Okay. So
I understand,
let's
but see right there, what you're doing there, see that's technically Iran is not Arab. They're Persian.
What? Persian?
Yes.
What, you're saying they're cats?
No, I'm not.
Cats and rugs living side by side. It'll never work, John. They're natural enemies.
I understand that. I know that cats and rugs are natural. Look. What? That's not what Persian. Why didn't you touch Saudi Arabia, by the way?
Why would I touch Saudi Arabia, Jonathan? They're a good, decent, oil-producing people.
See, this is not. I don't think this is going to work out.
Look, there's nothing the Arab respects, John, more than a strong, steady white hand drawing arbitrary lines twixt their ridiculous tribal allegiances.
But that's, see, right there, see, that seems a bit racist.
What? You're calling me what?
Well, it's a bit racist. It seems a bit racist.
You steady that ship. To call me racist would be to imply that I cared enough to hate them. Or was interested enough to learn things about them to dislike.
But see,
That's it. That's it.
That is exactly the kind of mindless imperialism that got us into this situation. Your casual ignorance has doomed the region to exist in a perpetual state. What are you doing? What are you doing right now?
I'm playing poker.
Wait, why?
Because you're boring me, John. And this is what real gentlemen do. They play poker on their iPhones whenever they become inexplicably bored by something incredibly important. I bid you good day, sir.
Sir Archibald, we have to
I said good day!
Okay, so just to convey to you how absurd it all is, two men who've never been in this part of the world, who don't know anything about it, suddenly were appointed to split up the region and give it out to various people. Okay, just to point out the unfairness of it all. Most of the things said in the video, although satirical, were actually true. The people don't know anything. He thought people in Iran were Arabs. No, they're Persian. And like in Syria, northern Syria and Iraq, those people are Kurdish. They're not Arabs. There's various tribal allegiances, ethnic boundaries that have been violated by the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And because of that, we have every single problem that have arisen today. Okay? So the first one was the Henry McMahon, the McMahon-Hussein correspondence. Second is the Sykes-Picot Agreement. We're not going to touch on the third, but it's very important. Who can tell me what it is? You should all know this. What? Yes, the Balfour Declarations. The Balfour Declarations, the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine. Okay, that's not directly relevant to our topic for today, but understand that these three agreements are the cause for every single problem that we face today in the Middle East. Now, just now, Ifat mentioned that ISIS originated from Iraq. So just a brief overview of what happened in Iraq starting from World War I. In 1917, Britain gains control over Iraq. 1923, Britain appoints Faisal ibn Hussein as the king of Iraq. Faisal ibn Hussein, the son of Sharif Hussein ibn Ali. Okay? Sharif Hussein had three sons. The first son was Ali, the second son was Abdullah, and the third son was Faisal. Ali was given control over Makkah, over the Hijaz. His rule lasted for less than a year. He was immediately toppled by the Saud family. Abdullah was given control over Jordan. His family remains in power to this day. And Faisal was given control over Iraq. This was after the Sykes-Picot Agreement, after the Treaty of Versailles in Paris. The Sharif family were adamant. They wanted this. They said to the British, "You promised us." So the British didn't exactly, they worked their way around. They said, "Okay, we'll give your 3 sons this." Still they didn't get they didn't rule collectively over the Arab lands. They didn't become the Khalifa. Although the first son, Ali, the king of Mecca for like a year or so, he self-appointed himself the Khalifa, but no one really acknowledged him. Now, the Hussein family, or the Sharif family in Iraq, Faisal lasted a while, and then he was replaced by his son, and then replaced by his nephew, and then so they lasted until about 1958, when the Iraqi people just about had enough of them and massacred the entire family. Now there was one of the cadets that he wasn't involved in the massacre, but his officer was. That cadet was Saddam Hussein. 10 years after the massacre, in about 1968-69, he became a prominent figure in the Iraqi military, and in 79, he becomes the president. So you can see directly from the Sykes-Picot Agreement, from the McMahon-Hussein correspondence, how it directly correlates to one of the biggest problems we have in the Middle East, the conflict in Iraq, the US invasion. And then after the US invasion, Al-Qaeda sends forces in Iraq. So Al-Qaeda in Iraq will later become the Islamic State in Iraq, which will later become ISIS. So ISIS stands for Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. We'll take a look at Syria for a bit. Now, as a result from the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the French occupied Syria, Damascus, and then they established a state. They wanted to divide Syria. So, I mean, they know that Syria has ethnic boundaries within it, has various types of people. So, like, to prevent further uprisings and protests and civil wars, they tried to divide Syria. Lebanon for the Christian Arabs, and then they had an Alawite state, which was above Lebanon. Yeah, so like Syria is like, hold up. So this is sort of what Syria looks like, sort of. Lebanon is here. They wanted this area to be the Alawite state, this area for the Christian Arabs, and then this area for the Druze people, the Druzi, and the rest is for Sunni and Shia. There was sort of a line here. Aleppo goes to the Sunni and Damascus goes to the Shia. Anyways, so they divided up Syria, and they wanted to appoint someone in charge, someone they could trust, to keep things in check for them, to monitor the Syrians. They wanted to appoint a bodyguard for them, some sort of security force to keep the people in check. So they hired the Alawites. The Alawites were known for their aggressiveness. Before World War I, they were a group of illiterate, savage people. They were known for raiding the other ethnicities, and everyone basically feared them. They were these guys, scary guys who lived in the mountains. So when the French came, they educated, they gave education, they gave wealth, they gave ranks and positions to the Alawites. And eventually, after the French left, one of them, Hafiz al-Assad, rose to power and became the president. And then his son Bashar succeeded him. Again, you can see a direct relationship, direct correlation from the Sykes-Picot Agreement to today's problems. Now, this is what Syria looks like today. This is as you can see, I don't know what to make of this. It's so complicated. Yeah, just look at it. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. You know, you wish that there was Bashar against the people of Syria. You wish it was that. But no. One thing that I can point out from this, if you look at ISIS on the chart, there is a red line from every single faction on this map connected to ISIS. ISIS is enemies with every single person on this chart. So, just to point out how messed up they're enemies with the Free Syrian Army, with Al-Qaeda, with Jabhat al-Nusra, with Turkey, with Iraq, with the US, with Assad. Okay? So, if you can take one thing from this map, just know that the situation there is not black and white. It's very complicated, and ISIS somehow managed to make enemies with every single person involved. Okay? Just shows you how messed up they are. Now, very brief history of ISIS. They began as Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So after the US invasion, Al-Qaeda sent forces to Iraq to fight the US, led by a man called Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Okay, he was their commander. In 2006, they had one of the branches of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, one of their subgroups called the Mujahideen Shura Council, decided they wanted to establish a state of their own, an Islamic state. Instead of just a militant group fighting the US, they wanted to establish a government, an independent state that would fight against the US. So from that, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria is formed. And in 2011, when the Syrian civil war began, ISI, that time under Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, begins to send forces into Syria. And that time they were joined with Jabhat al-Nusra, which was Al-Qaeda's, basically Al-Qaeda in Syria. There was Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Al-Qaeda in Syria. Al-Qaeda in Syria is known as Jabhat al-Nusra or the al-Nusra Front. And in 2013, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi says, okay, you know what? I'm going to create a state in Iraq and Syria. Now, Al-Qaeda didn't approve of this, and so they excommunicated ISIS, and from then, ISIS began carrying out its horrendous acts that made it all the enemies that it had from the previous chart. Now, key players, see if you know some of these faces. That guy, anybody know him? Distant cousin, maybe. Okay, anybody know him? This guy is Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the founder of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the guy who technically started it all. Anybody know this guy? Anyone? Looks like a nice old man, right? Very nice old man. He looks nice. He's smiling. Anybody know him? Seriously? No one? This is Ayman al-Zawahiri. You know him? Ayman al-Zawahiri? Who can tell me who Ayman al-Zawahiri is? Leader of Al-Qaeda. After the death of Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri became the leader of Al-Qaeda. Now, this guy. Who knows him? There's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, our Khalifa. Okay, if you haven't sworn allegiance to him, ISIS will kill you. You are not considered a Muslim in their eyes. Who knows this guy? Everyone knows this guy. He's so handsome. I mean, compared to the other guys, right? Okay. Seriously, you guys should see pictures of his wife. Okay, no, don't do that. Okay. This guy, who knows him? Everybody know him? There's John Kerry, the Secretary of State. He's the person in charge with going to these areas and coordinating all the joint airstrikes that we've been hearing about. Okay. Now, ISIS, as I mentioned, is a state. It's not just it's not just a militant group. It's not just a group of fighters causing trouble. No, they're actually a state. They have departments. They have ministries. They have people running different facets. And to explain that to you, I have a video from the Wall Street Journal based on sources within Iraq and Syria that explain how ISIS is run.
The Islamic State now administers thousands of square miles of captured territory. Its realm has at least 8 million Syrians and Iraqis living within it, an estimated 100,000 of whom swear allegiance to the organization. Though no other country recognizes it, the Islamic State is operating like a government with a bureaucratic hierarchy. How's it organized? At the very top is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who named himself Khalid. He functions in a role similar to that of a commander-in-chief. The Islamic State hasn't publicly described the chain of command and how decisions are made and implemented, but a number of outside experts have been researching the organization. One of them, Hashim al-Hashimi, a Baghdad-based expert on Islamist groups, described in detail to the Wall Street Journal who he says reports to whom. The general outline of the leadership structure has been corroborated by other experts and U.S. intelligence sources. Here's how it looks. Mr. Baghdadi has 2 top deputies. Abu Ali al-Anbari, who is responsible for Syria, and Abu Muslim al-Turkmani for Iraq. Both deputies were former generals under Saddam Hussein. These 3 top leaders are referred to collectively as al-Imara, the Emirate. Key strategic and policy decisions for the Islamic State are made at the Emirate level. Who falls under them? 12 governors of the Islamic State's 12 so-called provinces report to the 2 deputies. But 9 councils, which all report to Mr. Baghdadi's deputies, are responsible for creating policy and running the Islamic State. They function like departments or ministries. What do each of them handle? There's a leadership council, which reports to Mr. Baghdadi's deputies, and is responsible for making laws and handling many important decisions. Those decisions are subject to approval by Mr. Baghdadi, but they, the members of the Leadership Council, have the right, in theory, to depose the Caliph. The Leadership Council gets advice from the Shura Council, which weighs in on religious and military matters. It's composed of 9 people who are versed in Islamic law. The Military Council calls the shots on fighting and defense of the Islamic State's acquired territory. Experts believe more than 25,000 Islamic State fighters are currently in Syria and Iraq. The Legal Council handles family disputes and religious infractions. It's in charge of recruitment of followers and also makes decisions on punishments, often in the form of executions. The Security Council handles the internal policing of the controlled territory, including checkpoints. Among its duties, carrying out executions. The Intelligence Council provides information to the leadership on the Islamic State's enemies. The Financial Council functions as the organization's treasury. It handles oil sales, weapons sales, and oversees cash estimated to be in the many millions of dollars. The Fighters Assistance Council supports the jihadists arriving from other countries. It finds them housing. It also helps smuggle foreign fighters in and out of Iraq and Syria. The Media Council issues the organization's official pronouncements and declarations. In addition to managing the Islamic State's social media and other communications, it regulates various other media outlets that serve the Islamic State. According to a Jordanian expert on Islamist groups, it has a close relationship with the Legal Council in terms of coordinating the publicity surrounding executions. At the moment, this is how the so-called Islamic State, as a governing body, is organized.
Okay, so that's how ISIS works. It's a self-governing, fully independent state in and of itself. It's very thorough in its government, right? It's very, very well organized, and that's what makes it such a big threat. Now, the video mentioned a Shura Council composed of so-called experts, people who are well-versed in Islamic law. In reality, the equivalent for that, like if we were to govern like the Islamic State, the Shura Council would be considered of your current Nakibs and Nakibat. That's it. They're not experts. They haven't had any formal education in Islamic law. The Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri, they were self-taught in Islamic law. They had no formal education. Okay, so the Shura Council take that term very lightly. Okay. Now just some information about ISIS. That's their flag. That's their emblem. Some other names: Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. The Levant is basically just another name for Syria. And their official name, Al-Dawla al-Islamiyya fil Iraq wal Sham, or Dawla for short, or Daesh, which is basically just another further shortening of that. Bear in mind, if you call them Daesh to their face, they will execute you. So, as you've heard, the French government are officially calling them Daesh. It's a direct insult to the Islamic State. Now, over the years, they've gained large swaths of territory in northern Iraq and Syria. Mainly, they control strategic towns along various rivers, and also they control Iraq's largest and formerly second largest dam. They were driven out of Mosul by the airstrikes, but they still retain most of their original territory. The airstrikes have weakened their infrastructure, but haven't really reduced the territory by that much. Now, ISIS has provoked international response from all over the world, and this is due to their various actions. They've carried out genocide, they've carried out, as you know, executions, mass, they've taken various people prisoners that have never been seen before. In fact, there's various online forums where people discuss, about having their friends and family taken by ISIS, and you could just hear that these people, when you're taken by ISIS, basically there's almost no hope for you. They say, oh, you're just going to be a prisoner, but no, none of their prisoners have been so far documented to have survived capture by ISIS. Okay. Now, as a result of that, Islamic scholars, top high-ranking Islamic scholars from all over the world have signed an open letter to Al-Baghdadi. In the letter, they cite that ISIS is an offense to Islam. It does not resemble, or does not, doesn't, Islam in any way. Yeah, doesn't represent Islam in any way. And also, they criticize ISIS's theology, how they're dealing with Sharia law, with hudud, and all that stuff. So this is the open letter. You can read it. In it, they highlight various points. It's a very, very long letter. I highly recommend you use it. You read it. It clears up almost every question that you have about the legality of what ISIS is doing, and even clears up some of the confusion about the enforcement of Sharia law, about jihad, about non-Muslims. Every possible question that could be related to ISIS and their actions, and even like some other things. Yeah, I mean, in Malaysia we have people who want to enforce Sharia law, and I think this is addressed in that. I mean, not Malaysia, but like the enforcement of Sharia law. And down at the bottom, all the people who signed this, these are all well-versed scholars, very, very high-ranking scholars in Islam. Okay, from Malaysia. Okay, so every one of these guys, they're against ISIS. They're scholars against ISIS. Okay, there hasn't been any sort of unified response by scholars before. Okay, this something like this, it's never really happened before. Okay, so yeah, just that's the website, lettersofbaghdadi.com. I highly recommend you read through this. Okay. Now, next, of course, there are the various government actions. There's the US-led coalition. These were the recent airstrikes against Syria, carried out by US and those countries beneath, various Arabic countries. These coalitions have targeted strategic key points within ISIS infrastructure, like their defense, their finance building, their finance center that's been bombed, their locations, their defenses along Mosul Dam in Iraq, Iraq's largest dam that's been targeted. And the Turkish military has recently sent enforced troops in its borders to prevent jihadists from escaping. Okay, so jihadists who are from other countries join ISIS. They want to escape, they'll be captured by the Turkish military. The Australian and Royal Canadian Air Force has sent jets to help the US coalition. And Germany is involved. They're helping arm the Kurdish fighters, who are one of ISIS's major opponents in the Syrian civil war. This is all very recent stuff, like 1 to 2 weeks ago. So I barely know about this. So just if you want to find out more, there's I recommend looking at the official U.S. government sources or insider news reports from Syria and Iraq. The other sources, they tend to be, you read it for a bit and then suddenly they start getting into, you know, controversy and all that, Illuminati, all that stuff. So yeah, official government, U.S. government sources or insider information from Syria and Iraq. Okay. In conclusion, well, it's not really a conclusion. This part's pretty long. ISIS and Islam. What does Islam say about ISIS? Well, you already know all those scholars said ISIS is bad, ISIS is evil. We don't want anything to do with ISIS. So, let me elaborate on that. Extremism has been around in Islam since the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The first reported case was from the Battle of Hunayn. After the Battle of Hunayn, while the Prophet ﷺ was dividing the spoils of war, an old man approached the Prophet. He had a very thick beard. He had a shaved forehead. He was wearing very religious garments. He approached the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "Ya Muhammad, you're not supposed to address the Prophet ﷺ by his first name. That's very rude. Some scholars argue it is haram." He says, "Ya Muhammad, fear Allah and be just in your actions," which is basically a way of saying, I want more money. Okay? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied to him, "Woe unto you! If I am not just, if I do not fear Allah, then who on this earth will?" And the old man left. Now, some of the Sahaba, they were very irritated by this, and they wanted to execute the old man. You know, this is considered this is treason, basically. This is treachery. You know, but the Prophet ﷺ said, "No, leave him be. By executing him, you will not solve any problems, for there are more like him." Okay? And so for a while, there was not really much, you know, not really any other cases like that. And then in the time of the Khulafa ar-Rashidin, specifically during the rule of Ali radiallahu anhu, there was a civil war between Sayyidina Ali and Muawiyah. There was a civil war over political reasons. this war was over political reasons. There was nothing religious about this war. It wasn't a Sunni-Shia war. It was purely political. They disagreed on political reasons. And they decided it was wrong. At one point, they decided it was wrong to kill other Muslims over petty political reasons. So they decided to agree to a ceasefire. Now, from the camp of Ali, after the ceasefire was agreed, there were a group of people who were later known as the Kharijis, or as we know them, the Khawarij. They refer to the same group of people who opposed this ceasefire. They said, they accused Ali of not being a Muslim because he agreed to the ceasefire. Their reasoning was, in any sort of conflict, the truth will emerge victorious. Okay? So if you do not emerge victorious, you are not part of the truth. If you are true, Ya Ali, they said, you should have emerged victorious. If you are not, then Muawiyah should have emerged victorious. That was their logic behind all this. Black and white. So a group of them fled. They made their own camp. Okay? And since then, they have been terrorizing Muslims, Sunni Muslims, and even Shia Muslims for decades, for centuries. They've been around, they've been continuously harassing the Umayyads, the Abbasids, and now there's like just tiny remnants who are, I mean, they don't exist anymore. They've basically been eradicated. Only their least extreme, a very, very minimal version of them exists in Oman or that area. But they're not murderous or anything, they're just slightly radical. But these people, they were the first of the purely extremist groups in Islam. They were the first to split from Islam. This was before Shia-Sunni divide. These were the first group to split from Islam. One of the first crimes they committed against Islam was they beheaded one of the Sahaba and killed his family. Okay? Now, they beheaded him. If any of you have seen the ISIS video, they beheaded him from the front. They slit his throat open. In Islam, we don't do that. If there are beheadings in Islam, and if you know from any civilized culture in the West, beheadings are always from the back. We never slaughter someone like we slaughter an animal. That's not right. Now, just to try and give you guys a picture of these guys, and slightly a picture of what ISIS is thinking as well. Immediately after they slaughtered this guy, they found out one of their members stole an apple and killed a pig from one of the kafirs that were living in the area. Immediately, they denounced the guy. They got angry at the guy. They paid back the apple and the pig to the kafir. So, just picture that. They killed an innocent Muslim. Immediately after that, they had some sort of self-righteousness. They said, "What are you doing? We don't steal from people. We don't take from people." They just try. It's bizarre. They have this sense of self-righteousness but they don't. There's nothing righteous about them. And this characteristic is mentioned in a hadith, Sahih Muslim and also Bukhari, narrated by Abu Zar. The Prophet ﷺ said, "There will come a time when a group will arise such that they recite the Quran but it never leaves their throats. They will come, enter and leave the religion such like an arrow leaves its prey." So, if you shoot an arrow at a rabbit or something that's going really fast, it just goes right through the rabbit. That's the analogy. Like an arrow enters and leaves in prey and they will never return. And these people are the worst of Allah's creations. Now, that last sentence should summarize everything that this lecture was supposed to give, ISIS are the worst of Allah's creations. They have nothing to do with Islam. These people speak very flowery speeches. They seem to have a sense of righteousness. In another narration of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, these people will be of the most flowery of speeches. They will be a group of young men. Their acts of worship will be such that you will look down upon your own. Okay, these guys are very, like, they speak well. Their prayers, their acts of worship is more than yours, such that you think yours is nothing. That's what these people are. But they have nothing to do with Islam. Continuation from the others. But they have nothing to do with Allah and Islam. They are the worst of His creations. Okay? But that first part, where they said these people are self-righteous, that's what makes this group so dangerous. They seem to be Islamic on the outside. That's what's causing the confusion. We know they're not Islamic. We know that we don't execute people. We don't execute innocent people, let alone journalists. We don't carry out genocide, among women and children. Now, this isn't the first time something like this happened either, where there was a group of people who seemed to be self-righteous, okay, who seemed to be over-pious, who seemed to have a good cause, but in the end they're nothing but good. Let me go back to the previous slide. That last name, Juhayman bin Muhammad, how many of you have heard it? Has anyone here heard of Juhayman? Juhayman bin Muhammad was a student from a university in Medina. At that time, Saudi Arabia was beginning to import people from outside, to handle its oil and everything. So at that time, Western culture has begun to take an influence on Arabian culture. That time, alcohol was being sold for the first time in Saudi Arabia. Music was for the first time being sold in Saudi Arabia. Western television, Western music was for the first time being broadcasted in Saudi Arabia. And this guy, Juhayman bin Muhammad, he didn't like that. So he started a grassroots movement. He started a grassroots movement, got a couple of followers, and he did basically like what we're doing. We're spreading awareness about Islam. We're saying this is wrong, you shouldn't do that. This Western influence on us, it's wrong. Basically, good causes. Okay, they're saying to people, don't buy alcohol, don't listen to music excessively, don't pay no heed to this Western Western culture. Okay, and then from that grassroots movement, he began to develop another organization, a secret organization, composed of his most hardcore followers. Now these guys are the type of guys who would walk down the streets of Medina. When they would see a music store, they would break the glass, take all the cassettes, and destroy the place, basically. So they've been in a couple of arrests. Okay, obviously the police didn't just stand by, they've arrested these groups. But what happened when they were arrested? The scholars of Medina said, these guys are just over-pious people. They're good kids, they're my students, I know them. So, let them go. They're just a bunch of over-pious people. That's it. The scholars of Medina said this time and time again as they were causing this havoc and destruction in music stores and all that. Now mind you, it was just music stores at the time. So that secret organization, he said that he told his secret followers that his brother-in-law was the Mahdi. His brother-in-law was the Mahdi. And he said that he took inspiration from two hadith. The first hadith you all know is the hadith of the Mujahideen. Once every 100 years, Allah will appoint someone to renew the religion. Okay? The second hadith is that there will come a time when the Mahdi will flee to Makkah, take refuge in Makkah, and armies from all over the world will be sent to destroy him, but Allah will swallow up those armies. So what he did was, okay, let's take the Mahdi, let's go to Makkah on the 1st of Muharram 1400. I think it's 1400, yeah. This was in the 70s. So yeah, 1st of Muharram 1400, Hijrah. So basically what he's trying to do is, he read a hadith like, oh, this is a script that Allah is preparing for me. Now, does that make any sense to any of you? No, it's ridiculous. You read a hadith and you say, oh, that's a script for me to play out. No, no. Okay, that's just wrong. Don't do that. So what he did was he smuggled weapons into the Kaaba using funeral coffins. Inside the janazah carriers, he smuggled weapons. After the Fajr prayer on the 1st of Muharram 1400, he declared to everyone that the Mahdi is in their presence and that all of you should swear allegiance. Now this is on the 1st of Muharram. There are people coming to Makkah for performing the pilgrimage, Haji and everything. So there were people from Malaysia, from Indonesia, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, people who had nothing to do with this, who were just coming for the Hajj, trapped in Makkah. They were taken hostage for 2 weeks. Okay? And the guy basically took the Kaaba hostage as well. That's what he did. He took the Kaaba hostage. Okay? He placed snipers on the minarets around the Haram, and he kept that place locked down for 2 weeks. Any time someone tries to enter or exit, they would be gunned down. And basically, he is demanding that they all swear allegiance to him, that the Saud be toppled, that an Islamic state will be established. Does that sound familiar to any of you? That's exactly what ISIS is doing. So now eventually the Saudi military took down the guy. Over 500 people were killed, and eventually he was arrested and executed in public. Now the response to this, the scholars at that time didn't know how to respond to this. Most of the people who followed Juhayman were top students under the most senior scholars in Islam at the time. They said, that guy was my student, I had no idea. He was one of my best students. Okay, just to tell you about these kind of people. And Juhayman himself, he was a student at the University of Medina. Bear in mind, they're all students. None of them are scholars. Okay? None of them are scholars. None of them are versed in Islam at a senior level. Okay? This type of confusion is what we don't want. Okay? We need to establish right here, right now, that extremism in Islam is wrong. ISIS is wrong. Juhayman is wrong. By the way, you can take a picture. If you Google Juhayman, you look at a picture of him, you just know he's nuts. Seriously. Okay, anyways, so okay, so Juhayman, he took the Kaaba hostage. Then from Juhayman, someone was watching the news in Afghanistan. Someone in Afghanistan was watching the news saying, oh, that guy, he was up to something big. I really like his ideas. Yeah, he was extreme, but he is onto something, and I should follow in his footsteps. Osama bin Laden. Okay? Because of Juhayman. Now, before Juhayman, Osama was not really an Islamic person. After Johairman, he began to study Islam on his own, founded Al-Qaeda, and here we are today. He's dead, and his followers are still doing stuff. Okay, so again, the hadith. These kind of people are nothing but Islamic, and they are the worst of Allah's creations. So these extremists, as in conclusion, these extremists, there will be some people who say they're right. There will be some people who are, you know, if you look at ISIS's recruitment videos, they're very well made. The narrative is very strong. They're like Amin level videos. They're really, really good. Okay? And now what ISIS is doing with those videos, as I showed you at the beginning of the presentation, the Middle East has been in conflict for as long as we can remember. The people there have been oppressed by one group, after another, after another, after another. In Syria, it was Assad. Before Assad, it was another Assad. Before the other Assad, it was the French. Before the French, it was, I don't know, but it was the Alawites, you know, they were terrorizing. So one regime after another continuously oppressing the people. In Iraq, you know, before it was the British, and then after that there was a series of bloody civil wars. After that there was Saddam Hussein, who was a Sunni, oppressed the Shia. Now there's a Shia who's oppressing the Sunni. It's just a mess. And people's families have been killed, people's lands have been taken, their treasures have been robbed. Now what ISIS is doing is, oh people of Iraq and Syria, you have been oppressed for far too long. You have watched your families being slaughtered in front of your very eyes. You've watched your land being taken from you, your treasures being taken from you. Join us and we will topple the oppressors. We will help you take revenge. After a narrative like that, who doesn't want to join them? Okay? That's why it needs to be made very clear that these guys are not Islamic. They're using Islam. They're hijacking the name of Islam to gather support. They're sweetening it with a narrative of vengeance and revenge and taking back what is yours. That's how they've gathered so many people. That's how they've gained this so-called success, if you will, that they have right now. But we need to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that what they are doing is completely wrong and completely un-Islamic. That is all I have. Are there any questions? Seriously, any questions?
Do they have any like official websites or something like
Any sort of social media that they try to establish is immediately blocked. Normally, I try to find their official sources from Reddit. No, come on, Reddit has some good to it. Give it a shot. But seriously, I can recommend a few sources, but they're on places like Reddit, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you know that Reddit is just a collection of information shared by users from all around the world. Their videos can be found on LiveLeak. LiveLeak is like an uncensored version of YouTube, so trust me. Actually, no, don't go on LiveLeak, seriously. Some of their officials have Twitter accounts. You can find them. If you just, yeah, so you can follow. Normally, if you read news sources like BBC, Al-Jazeera, the Middle East Eye, foreign policy, and stuff like that, they will cite Twitter sources from the official ISIS top officers or stuff like that. And recently, ISIS itself is locking down, means it's only going to publish like recruitment videos and execution videos. It's not, I don't think it's going to continue tweeting anymore, that's from what I've read. Yeah, but this subject matter is kind of tricky. If you go on like Reddit or Lively, which you should find some stuff, but tread lightly, tread cautiously, beware. Like the stuff you see on Lively can scar you for life. Okay, any other questions? No? No other questions? That's it? Alright.
Can I talk English?
Yeah.
That's my first question.
Yeah.
My second one is, let's say we have a situation like an individual. Wow. Okay. Like we have an Muslim individual, like he wants or she wants to change, and of course, like he needs something. I mean, a religion, and specifically Islam, and he really wants to change. And at one time, he realized that this is extremism. So why should I change? Because it's an extremism. So that girl or that boy will not change at all.
Okay, so from what I understand, ada orang nak masuk Islam, and then he reads about ISIS and everything, says Islam is extremist. So why should I change? Why should I convert? And
It's not from a non-Muslim to be a Muslim, but it's more to
from a Muslim
to be very Muslim.
Okay, I get it. One, you can show them this hadith. Okay, those extremist groups aren't Islam. Okay. Second of all, you can tell that there are two forms of extremist Muslims. One is ISIS. The other is those secular type Muslims who don't do anything. Okay? And that what true Islam is a middle ground. That's all that it is. Okay? But just show them this hadith. Technically, or the open letter from the scholars. Al-Baghdadi.com. Give him that website. Tell him to read it. It addresses most of the issues. Or her.
Lepas tahu semua benda ni ISIS ni, so apa pandangan kita sebagai student untuk masalah?
Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but me myself, I've been just walking around and people have approached me saying, what do you think about ISIS? Okay? At least now, you guys have some sort of answer to that question. You can tell them that with confidence that ISIS is Islam, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has addressed this issue 1400 years ago. And basically, generally, just spread awareness out. That's our job, to spread awareness. It's always been our job, spread the truth.
But the questioner doesn't believe in Prophet Muhammad. How about that?
Yeah, okay. But he or she thinks that ISIS will represent Islam in some way again. And our key figurehead is Muhammad ﷺ. Even though, I don't think that's if his or her belief in Muhammad ﷺ is directly relevant, if we can show that Islam doesn't support these people. If he doesn't believe in Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, then there's that open letter from the 126 scholars who are alive now. Any more questions?
can you define more what is extremist in Islam actually? Is it under the, does it have any relationship with the Munafiq or something like that?
Extremism, based on this hadith, extremists are people who speak Islam, who from the outside they show Islam to a very great degree, but their actions are the complete opposite of Islam. That's the definition of extremism according to this hadith. They speak and act as if, outwardly they show as if they're Islamic, but their actions are the complete opposite of Islam. So like ISIS, their actions are, they show that somehow they proclaim that they're Islamic, they call themselves the Islamic State, but their actions are the complete opposite of what Islam tells you to do. Now the Munafiq, they're people who say they're Islam. I mean, in some sense they're related, but historically the Munafiq, they don't carry out these extreme acts that the extremists do. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Any other questions? Any further? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Now, I forgot to put together a reference page for this slide. I'm sorry. But my main references were two videos by Sheikh Yasir. The first video is called 1914. The 1914 and then something modern Muslim world. And then the other video is a khutbah titled Kharijism and Extremism in Islam. And I've also had various sources from the books that I've been given when I was taking the Arab Spring course. But if anyone wants a full list of references, just email me and I'll give them to you. And I highly recommend that you watch those two Yasir videos. If you just go on his page, on his YouTube page, you just go to videos. They should be very recent, like within the first 2 rows. The 1914 one, if you sort them by most popular, you should find it quite easily. And 1914 is that video is directly related to ISK. So if you want more information on ISK, on the topics presented in ISK, and specifically the fall of Islam, that video is a great resource. Basically, if you just watch it, I don't think you'll need to go to ISK. That's how comprehensive it is. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, yes. One last question.
Do they have supporters from outside Iraq and Syria?
Yes, they have supporters numbering in the thousands. There's about 500 or so from the US, about 300 from the UK. There's been about somewhere in the tens from Malaysia actually, but those people have been detained by the ISA. So ISA is doing something good. Again, when the ISA does something good with regard to a topic, you know how messed up they are. If the ISA can solve it. Anyways, but yeah, and then like in that video I showed you by the Wall Street Journal, they have a Foreign Assistance Council, which deals with, they have an entire ministry dealing with people coming from abroad.
Can you please summarize all your reference and sources on a page and publicize it on the event page?
Yeah, okay, so, I'll do that, and then I'll put it on the event page, the references. Okay. If there are no other questions, I guess that's all for today. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.